So, for centuries, knowledge is power has been this thing painted on the walls of, well, almost every school.
Oh, absolutely. You see it on university brochures. Parents repeat it constantly to their kids.
Right. It's like this ultimate promise we make to you, the listener. Memorize these facts, pass the tests, fill your brain with enough information, and you will become this formidable, powerful person.
Yeah, we spend decades treating human potential like this giant accumulation game,
Yeah.
just assuming the person with the most data inevitably wins,
But what if the philosopher who actually coined that exact phrase believed the tools we use to gather knowledge are fundamentally flawed?
which is a pretty massive contradiction, right?
Yeah.
What if hoarding facts is exactly the thing making you powerless?
Exactly. And to figure out why that might be a losing game, we are diving into a single, really provocative essay today. It's from 2017, and it's titled Knowledge is Not Power.
Right. Written by Xuefeng,
Right.
translated by Treasure, and edited by Kaffer.
Yeah. So the mission for our deep dive today is to totally dismantle this deeply ingrained assumption about intellectual accumulation.
And we are going to look at what actually drives true power and success.
I want to start with a metaphor the author uses, which is viewing a person's brain as this grand library.
Oh, I love that one. Like a building just packed floor to ceiling with heavy leather-bound books. Every book is a fact you've memorized or a degree you've earned.
Yeah, a piece of historical trivia, whatever.
Yeah,
And it possesses the foundation for power, sure. But a building full of books doesn't inherently possess any kinetic energy of its own.
right. It just sits there. The books don't act.
So if knowledge is just this static library, let's start with the origin of the phrase itself. Like, where did knowledge's power come from, and how did it become the ultimate carrot on a stick?
Well, the phrase originates with the 17th century British philosopher Francis Bacon. It's specifically in his work called Meditation.
Okay, bacon.
Yeah, and the essay points out a certain tragic irony in how his words have been weaponized by educational institutions over the centuries.
Weaponized how? Like, to keep students in line?
Exactly. Teachers use it to arouse students' learning interest. It functions as this contractual promise. Basically, grasp this specific curriculum, and you'll be granted the power to achieve your ideals later,
So it forces students to blindly believe that just learning school lessons equates to real-world influence.
which is a huge assumption.
But if knowledge is just this static library of curated facts, we have to look at the acquisitions department. Where are the books coming from?
Right. How are we gathering the information that we're supposedly building our power upon?
Fundamentally, all human knowledge is gathered through our sense organs: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell.
Yeah, we observe the universe through these biological filters, process that sensory data, and then we just record it as knowledge.
And this is where the essay highlights a massive, fascinating philosophical contradiction. The text brings up the ancient Greek philosopher Protagoras.
Oh, you're right. The measure of everything guy.
Exactly. He claimed human is the measure of everything. And that is the baseline assumption of almost all academia, that human perception is the ultimate yardstick for reality.
But the essay points out that Francis Bacon, the very same guy who gave us knowledge as power, actually refuted Protagoras.
Wait, really? The same guy?
Yeah, Bacon explicitly wrote, "It is a great mistake to conclude that our limited sense organs measure all things."
That is wild. The same guy who effectively wrote the marketing slogan for modern education also admitted the tools we use to gather knowledge are flawed.
He understood the hardware limitations. The author is using that contradiction to expose the fragile foundation of our entire knowledge system.
Because Bacon recognized that human sense organs only perceive a microscopic fraction of reality.
Right. We can't see ultraviolet light. We don't feel the rotation of the Earth. We can't perceive dark matter.
Yet we take the minuscule sliver of reality our biology actually allows us to access, label it comprehensive knowledge, and then use it to judge all things.
Which the author warns us is a profound error. It's wrong to measure the vast, multidimensional reality of the universe based solely on extremely limited biological data.
Okay, so our knowledge base is fundamentally limited by our biology. The library is incomplete.
Very incomplete.
So what happens when that limited static knowledge goes head-to-head with other, more visceral forces in the real world?
Oh, this leads to the interview scenario. Let's look at that.
Yeah, because the essay provides a very specific scenario here, and I want to push back on it a little bit.
Go for it.
The author asks us to picture a male interviewer, and standing in front of him are two candidates. One is a young, beautiful girl with only a middle school diploma,
Right.
and the other is a more mature, older lady who holds a doctorate degree. The author states that the young girl is far more likely to arouse the man's rich imagination, alter his mood, and motivate his intense vitality.
It is a very jarring example to read.
I mean, honestly, my first thought was that this is just describing basic human bias. It sounds like a critique of an interviewer's lack of professionalism. How does this actually prove knowledge isn't power?
Well, to understand the author's exact thesis here, we have to impartially look at how they define power.
Okay, how do they define it?
The essay defines power strictly as the ability to move things, to alter moods, to motivate intense vitality. The author isn't making a moral judgment on the interviewer.
So they aren't endorsing superficial bias.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They are clinically dissecting the mechanics of influence. This proves knowledge is not true power, because a primal force-like physical beauty can wield far more immediate motivating power over human behavior than a PhD.
Ah, I see. So it's not that the knowledge is wrong, it's that a primal trigger acts like a fast lane bypass circuit.
That bypass circuit analogy is perfect. The PhD represents an enormous library of stored static facts.
Right, a massive software program.
But that vast library can be instantly overridden by a basic biological trigger hitting the hardware's override switch.
The author uses this intentionally uncomfortable example to shatter the illusion that academic knowledge is the ultimate trump card in life.
Exactly. In real-world mechanics, static knowledge often lacks the kinetic force to change human behavior.
So, if knowledge can be bypassed that easily, is it just ineffective or is it actively holding us back?
The essay takes a pretty hard turn here. The author argues that treating knowledge as absolute power is a cognitive and thinking misconception.
And a dangerous one, right?
Very. This moves us from a philosophical critique to a highly practical warning about what happens when prejudices masquerade as knowledge.
Once something gets written down and placed in the cultural library, successive generations stop questioning it.
Right, they just accept it as a universal law.
The author actually lists several specific traditional sayings that have been passed down for centuries as knowledge. Let me just read the list they provide.
Yeah, read them.
When a son is grown, he takes a wife, and when a girl is mature, she finds a husband. There are 3 forms of unfilial conduct, but the worst is to have no descendants.
And there's more, right?
Yeah. Filial piety is the most important of all virtues. Lewdness is the worst of all sins. He who does not endure hardship cannot stand up to others.
I mean, these aren't scientific facts at all.
No, they are cultural operating systems. But for thousands of years, these phrases were not debated. They were just taught as the immutable laws of how the world works.
And the author points out the inherent danger here, which is that objective reality is constantly changing.
Right. Society evolves, economies shift.
Exactly. And when the living world changes, but we stubbornly apply this traditional dead knowledge to our lives, we are harshly rebuffed by reality. This is why it causes so much anguish.
It really makes me think of trying to navigate a modern, sprawling city using a map drawn in the 1500s.
Well, that's a great way to put it.
You just keep crashing your car into buildings that didn't exist when the map was made. But because you've been told the map is absolute knowledge, you blame yourself for the crash instead of throwing away the map.
And the essay extends this critique to religious dogmas, too. It argues that when traditional dogmatic systems sense a loss of power, they become reactionary.
Because reality is outpacing their dead knowledge.
Exactly. They resist social development and impede natural human liberation because their only way to maintain control is to force reality back into the shape of their outdated maps.
Man. And this doesn't just happen on a grand societal scale. The author brings up a really compelling point about parenting.
The parenting dynamic is tragic, really.
Yeah, most parents rely on their own accumulated knowledge to guide their children. But the essay asks if a parent's stored knowledge can actually educate a child with healthy spirits, minds, bodies, and the ability to live independently.
And the conclusion is that most fall incredibly short. Parents pass down the traditional fallacies they inherited, entirely out of love, mind you.
Right, they think they are protecting them, teaching them that enduring hardship is the only way to succeed, or that a very specific path is mandatory.
But that dead knowledge fails to equip the child for the actual, rapidly changing world they will have to navigate.
The parent is basically handing the kid the 1500s map and sending them out onto the highway.
Yeah, good luck out there.
So, if filling our mental library with these old maps is a trap, what is the alternative? How do we actually navigate?
Well, the author offers a really clear pivot here. They state that our most powerful intellectual force is not the accumulation of facts.
What is it then?
It's the power of flexible and tactful thinking.
Thinking versus knowledge. I feel like this is the crucial distinction of the whole essay.
It really is. And the text uses Albert Einstein to drive this home. His power didn't come from his vast knowledge, but from his thinking.
Specifically, the essay references his famous thought experiment. How would I perceive the universe if I were riding on a beam of light?
Right. Memorizing the existing physics equations of the 19th century wouldn't help him arrive at that question.
The static knowledge of his time would have probably told him that question was nonsensical.
Exactly.
Mhm.
He had to use flexible thinking to manipulate variables that couldn't even be tested in a lab yet. It's not about what you have stored, it's about what you can construct on the fly.
It's like the difference between knowing the name of every single bicycle part ever manufactured versus actually being able to visualize how to ride a bike over a mountain.
Memorizing the parts doesn't get you over the mountain.
And the author explicitly warns about the people who only focus on collecting the parts. The essay warns about the trap of diplomas.
Yeah, this part is fascinating. The text notes that people who read more, get more diplomas, and gather more experience often form rigid ways of thinking.
Because they've invested so much time into building their mental library.
Yes, it's a sunk cost fallacy. They become fiercely protective of their static knowledge and entirely inflexible when reality contradicts it.
So they rarely wield much true power. They just become trapped in their own fortress of facts. Okay, so we've upgraded from rote memorization to dynamic thinking. But the author argues that even brilliant, flexible thinking isn't the absolute bedrock of lasting human power.
No, the essay moves beyond the intellect entirely for its final conclusion. It asks what generates power on a permanent, lasting scale in human society.
And it's not economic strength or national defense forces, right?
Nope. The author outlines what actually yields lasting power, and it's a list of 6 virtues.
I have to admit, when I first read this transition, it felt a little jarring. We go from discussing cognitive friction in biology to sincerity, kindness, virtue, love, faith, and honesty.
It sounds like a greeting card at the end of a physics lecture, right?
Yeah, totally.
But on the surface, while it seems like a sudden pivot to morality, we have to look at the actual mechanism of how these virtues function in society.
Okay, break that down for me. Why do these specific traits hold lasting power?
Because unlike static knowledge, these virtues are active relational forces. They are the operating system that allows human collaboration to function.
Ah, I
Yeah,
see.
the author states. Sincere deeds have power. Kind behavior has power. Things of virtue have power. Love is a powerful force. Honest quality has power. People who keep their words and their faith have power.
Let's think about the mechanics of that. How does honesty, for example, act as kinetic power?
It comes down to friction and network effects. Think of trust as a tangible currency. If someone possesses a PhD and a brilliant mind, but they are fundamentally dishonest or cruel, the transaction costs of dealing with them are enormous.
People will constantly double-check their work, withhold information, and eventually just isolate them.
Exactly. Their vast knowledge becomes functionally useless because society routes around them.
But if someone is perhaps less formally educated, yet entirely reliable, sincere, and kind, the friction drops to zero.
Right. People will actively build networks around them. They'll share resources, give them responsibilities, and trust them with leadership.
So the virtues act as a magnet for societal kinetic energy. Sincerity and faith are risk reduction mechanisms for the group.
By practicing these virtues, you generate a kinetic social force that outlasts any single fact. Military might fades, economies crash, traditional knowledge becomes outdated.
But a foundation of faith, honesty, and love remains robust regardless of how objective reality shifts. That is a highly rigorous sociological conclusion, not just a moral platitude.
It reframes the entire concept.
Yeah.
It's basically an economic and social physics principle.
So for anyone listening who has spent their life chasing degrees or feeling insecure about the size of their mental library, the author has very direct advice.
Yeah, rather than spending your precious time desperately chasing knowledge or reciting old, prejudicial knowledge.
You are much better off concentrating your efforts on your character, focusing on those 6 virtues and developing a flexible way of thinking.
Step out of the library, stop obsessing over the inventory of facts, and actually participate in the living world with an adaptable mind. That's where true leverage lies.
Well, let's do a quick recap of the ground we've covered today. We started by challenging human perception itself, realizing our limited sense organs make our knowledge incomplete.
Right, and we saw how easily static knowledge can be overpowered by primal visceral forces.
We unpacked the danger of hoarding dead traditional knowledge and how navigating the world with outdated cultural maps causes so much anguish.
We learned that true intellectual force requires flexible thinking rather than rigid memorization.
And finally, we uncovered the mechanics of lasting power, realizing that trust, sincerity, and moral character build the networks that actually move the world.
It's a complete systematic dismantling of how we view intelligence. And it leaves us with a final, lingering question to turn over.
What's that?
Well, we spend so much of our lives focused on acquiring data. But if stubborn traditional knowledge actively impedes our natural liberation, as the author suggests,
Yeah.
then perhaps the greatest display of true power isn't in how much you can learn, but in how quickly you are willing to unlearn everything you thought you knew.
Wow. Having the courage to walk into your own grand, meticulously organized mental library, look at all those heavy books you spent years collecting, and simply open the windows to the living, breathing world outside.
That's real power.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you navigate your week, maybe approach your next learning opportunity with a bit more skepticism, a lot more flexibility, and a focus on the virtues that actually matter.